I was diagnosed at 33, and because of my dense breast tissue, they would not give me a mammogram, but I knew something was not right. I just felt it in my body, um, that something was going on. I just didn't know how to address it, And so, but one thing about being in the Black community, those are things that we just don't talk about. Cancer diagnoses, death. We just kind of brush it under the table or under the rug, and we don't discuss it. So I didn't advocate for myself as much as I should have. But then after this, towards the end of the second year, I just kept asking for a mammogram. And finally, my primary care physician finally gave me a referral to get a mammogram. And so it was detected in the mammogram that they found calcium clusters in my breast. And so after them taking some samples of tissues, it was discovered that I did have DCIS, which is ductal carcinoma in situ, which is breast cancer in the milk ducts. So, excuse me. So I was scheduled immediately for 36 rounds of radiation as well as a lumpectomy. But during my diagnosis and talking about surgery, there was so much information and it was very overwhelming. And my kids were really small, and I had my 4-year-old daughter sitting on my lap, while they were telling me my diagnosis, while they were telling me my life expectancy. And so it was a lot to take on. And I know I had a support system, but at that time I just hadn't tapped into it. So throughout my first diagnosis, I kept it really quiet, even from my kids. And I heard that Anusha said, Dr. Lopez saying, talk to your children. But again, in the Black community, not only did we not discuss it with the adults, we didn't talk about it with the kids as well. But by the time I was going to reach my 5-year mark, which is considered cancer-free, I had done tamoxifen for the 5 years and my radiation and everything. And when I thought I was done with everything, they found it again. So they found more calcium clusters in the same breast. But this time I just decided let's do a mastectomy, because I didn't want to feel like a guinea pig. And so by this time, my kids were older, and I told them exactly what was going on. It's best that they can understand, because they were probably the age of 16 down to the age of 9. So to try to explain that to the smaller ones was a little hard, but we just said that mommy had an owie. That way they knew to be careful, but at the same time, they weren't wondering why were so many people at the house, or why was she going to the doctor, or why I was sad. And so with the second surgery, I ended up doing, like I said, a mastectomy, but I also opted for reconstruction. But going back to what I think Dr. Lopez said, that sometimes some doctors don't give you the options. They kind of, depending on who your provider is, they give you so much information, but they don't say that there are other options other than death, because like Dr. Lopez said, when you're first diagnosed or you hear the word cancer, you immediately think of death. And so that's what I thought of. And most of the information I was given was my life expectancy, but there were any other options, like your life could be prolonged if you do this or that. So just moving forward, after my mastectomy and reconstruction, the reconstruction lasted 54 hours. And I was told after 48 hours with reconstruction, because I had a tram flap. And for those who don't know what a tram flap is, it's when they take the belly fat and they create you a breast. And so I was told after 48 hours, if it lasts, then I should be okay. But after 54 hours, the pulse in the breast, in the tissue, it died. So they had to go back in for about 9-hour surgery to try to save the breast, if you will, or save the tissue. And it didn't last, and it just died off. And then, so since then, I've just opted not to do any more surgeries, but that taught me something, that it's good, as Anusha said, to advocate for yourself, do your research and know what you're getting into. Now, The second diagnosis, that particular doctor was more, he gave me more information. So that made me feel a little more comfortable about asking more questions. But initially, the first time, I didn't feel comfortable, and I was not forced to ask any questions. But thankfully, the first diagnosis, my mother was alive. On the second diagnosis, she had already passed away from cancer as well. So I didn't have her, but I had a really good village or support system around me. So I just want to say to, being a survivor now, a two-time survivor now, it really pushes me to encourage others who are going through it. And I have friends that have been diagnosed recently, and they get afraid because the first thing they think of is death. And most of them have children or small children. And so they're afraid to advocate for themselves. So I try to encourage them to allow me to either go to the doctor with them or be on the phone with them so that I can hear what's going on. Because most of the time when you go to the doctor, especially for a cancer diagnosis, you're not thinking these particular questions. Your mind is overwhelmed. You're thinking of other outside things. And so I try to teach ladies and men and women to write it down. Just write down your first 5 or whatever it is, because you only get 10, 15 minutes with the doctor sometimes. And then when you're gone, that's when all the information starts to flow. And then those are all the questions you wish you had asked. And so sometimes we don't want to say anything because we just don't know. And like Anusha, as well as Lopa said, educate yourselves, find out what's going on with your body, because I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what to call it. Because again, at the age of 33, like Lopa said, they tell you at 40 to go get a mammogram. Well, I was 33 years old. So had I waited 7 more years, I may not be talking to you now. So, and it's not easy, it's not easy to do all the research or to ask the questions, but it's just always good to have a support system. And it's not comfortable, but it's a conversation that we do need to have. And like I said, especially in the Black community and here in the United States, a lot of times we don't want to talk about it because we think if we don't talk about it, it'll go away. And as Dr. Lopa was saying, I want to break that taboo as well. The more we talk about it, the more comfortable we'll be talking about it, because it's not just us, it's our sons and our daughters. And cancer is very rampant in my mother's side of the family. I have aunts, uncles, her sisters and brothers have died from different types of cancer: lung cancer, brain cancer, pancreatic cancer, it's all of that, so we have to talk about it. So I do talk about it with friends of mine in my community. And I'm also an advocate for another agency. So when they get, anyone that gets that diagnosis, I get on the phone and I just try to talk, just to hear what they have to say. Maybe they just want to talk and cry, and that's okay. Because I'm not a doctor, but I've been through it enough to where I can give some answers, but I also encourage them to get the answers for themselves as well. And so also one more thing with like caregivers. I don't know if there's any caregivers out there, but just know that you have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of the patient. You cannot become the patient as a caregiver. And I know sometimes it's hard, especially if it's a spouse or a child of yours or someone else that's really close to you. But it's very important to take care of yourself so that you can help them get well. Because if both of you are laying in the bed next to each other, unwell from different maladies, then it's harder for the real patient to get better. So again, I am very thankful to just share my story. Being a 2-time cancer survivor does not make me any better than anyone else. I still have my struggles once in a while when it's time to go get that mammogram. But this last thing I'll share, I got my letter, and I shared it with Dr. Lopa. I finally got my letter that after 20 years of going for mammograms, every 3 months, having all these different MRIs and different stuff like that, that I no longer have to go to the oncologist every year. So now I still have to do my mammograms every 2 years now, but I'll still do them every year just because of the history. But after doing all that for 20 years straight, I no longer have to have an oncologist or anything like that. So I am very grateful. And as Anusha said, I wish you all the best. And again, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.